Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. We got Joe Rogan, and they're talking about some pretty deep stuff. Now, one of the things, if I had to sum it up, was the thing that fights totalitarianism, no matter what, is a belief in God. And listen, if you're one of those people and you don't have that belief, but you got a strong constitution and you love the Constitution, I hear you. You're going to stand up no matter what. But when they're talking about Mao in China, I'm going to be talking about Stalin. You know, there was a strong attack on religion because people with these beliefs, it was very hard to make them believe in the state over their religion. We're going to get into that. So I got the Joe Rogan clip. Then I have a Tucker clip. And he's talking with a pastor. And then I'm going to show you a quick clip of what it's called the Three Self Church in China looks like. And it's pretty interesting. Let's get into it. And also we're going to touch on really quick at the end, just talking about how the people who think that they're going to have a revolution and it's going to be all good for them don't realize that they quickly become the problem after the revolution is over. Now, don't forget about the new channel that I got, Coach Colin Media. It's where I break away from the Rogan content. If that's something you've been interested in seeing for the longest time, I tell you right now, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Other than that, let's watch this Rogan clip.
The stuff that you're talking about that seems to be absolutely true and provable, that's you're letting that stuff go through because it opposes your ideology, and that, by definition, makes you a cult member.
That's exactly right. So yeah. the cult, and I don't know if you know who Robert Lifton is. Robert Lifton he's kind of weird now. He's still alive, but he was like you would talk about gangsters doing infiltration. This dude was in Hong Kong in the 1950s. And he started interviewing guys that were going through Mao Zedong's brainwashing prisons. And then when they would get thrown out of China after they'd get out of the prison after 3-4 years of getting brainwashed, started interviewing them, like, what did Mao do? How did he, literally, the title of his book that he wrote off of this is called Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, a study of brainwashing in China, which is Xinao in Mandarin. I know a little Mandarin. And so the idea is that they were doing what Mao called ideological transformation or ideological remolding in these prisons. And he wanted to know how it worked. What's the psychological dynamic? And he said there are 8 primary characteristics, and God only knows if I could rattle off 8 things from memory, but the first one is milieu control. In other words, you have to completely control the environment of the people that are within it. And so you can't let them have outside information. You can't let them get near people who are raising uncomfortable questions. You have to say that those people are a danger to what Mao called democratic centralism, or we would say Joe Rogan's a danger to our democracy. I think they said when you took ivermectin or something like that, right? And so you have to control the environment people are in, and then there's other things like mystical manipulation into a sacred science and all this other. There's 8 of them he has, which is finally at the end, which it's got doctrine over person, but he calls it like the expiration. That's not the right word, but it's the dispensing of the person. So the people who go along with it, who are in the cult, are treated as people, and the people who don't go along with it have to be treated as non-people. And that's Mao Zedong gave a famous speech in 1957 where he actually said, to not have a correct political orientation is like not having a soul. So you're no better than a capitalist running dogs. You're no better than the dogs. Well, I mean, we like dogs, but you know what I mean, how he would have meant it. And so it's like you're no better than an animal if you don't go along with this. And that's what you're saying. That's a cult. And all this bears the hallmarks of a cult.
And it feels like that is a natural pattern that humans fall into. And I think particularly if you're not religious. I think one of the things about religious people is they've already got their thing. So, and hopefully it's one that promotes good values and it's a good thing. Yeah. But there's a part in the brain that wants that thing. Yeah. And atheists, they don't have a religion, and so they find a social religion.
Social religion, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So they find it in their social circumstances, politics, economics, and it always goes demonic when they do that. I've been spending a lot of time, thanks to Charlie Kirk, I've been spending a lot of time paying attention to the tenets of Christianity and studying it, and it's got a lot of good advice in there. But you are 100% right that if you try to lack a religion, and the primary thing with the religion, so if you lack a religion, then it'll get filled in with other things for very many people. I think there's a small percentage of people for maybe that doesn't apply, but
there's a spot in your brain for it.
But the thing that, why do they go after Christians and Jews so hard everywhere they go? And the reason is because they are completely committed to. They're not. When you say they already have their thing, for Christians and Jews, that's not how they think about God. It's not their thing. That's something that's above everything else.
Well, the Muslims as well.
Well, Muslims too. But Islam's a little bit different because it's got a political element worked into it. And I'm not trying to throw shade. I'm just saying that there the state is never above God in Christianity and Judaism. Ever. The state and God are somewhat intertwined, or can be in Islam, but it's not, so they're not quite identical, but it's true. The God is above state, no question. So when the state shows up and says to you, hey, you're going to do X, Y, Z or else, and it goes against your religion, if you're a Christian, a Jew, and to many, if it's not Islam, a Muslim, you're going to say, no, I have a higher duty, and it's not to the state. And if you kill me, I'm going to a better place, so I don't care. And that's the enemy of totalitarianism in a way that nothing else is. The Confucian virtues of China don't have that. Buddhism actually kind of doesn't have that.
Well, you can't tell the CIA this, because then they're going to co-opt the churches.
Well, that's what the documentary is actually about, is how the co-opting of the churches took place in the Soviet Union, actually.
Yes.
And so, and then how, okay, so you put it on the table. I think that's what this whole stupid Christian nationalism thing, I think that's part of the purpose of the Christian nationalist dialogue. And I'm not exactly a Christian nationalist. I'm probably one of his most vocal opponents.
You think it's like agent provocateurs?
That's right. I think that they want to recreate something that looks like Charlottesville, you know, the very fine people on both sides incident, or like January 6th. They get somebody to do something stupid or violent, or maybe they just run a narrative.
Well, there's always been people that when they see these well-uniformed people walking around with Nazi flags with their face covered, they're like they're feds.
Yeah.
People always think that.
Yeah.
They always think that, which is a terrible thing to think, that your own federal government is involved in doing something to stir racial hatred, or at least give the image that racial hatred is being stirred, and then connect that racial hatred with people that just don't believe what you believe and believe in God.
Right. And that's what, I mean, that's why this Christian nationalist thing, you know, it's a leap that's not very far in most minds from Christian nationalist to white Christian nationalist.
Right.
And it's so easy for them to say then that independent conservative churches, and I would say those in particular, are a hothouse for domestic extremism. And then they start cracking down on that. Maybe it's the FBI agents are going to church every week and they're writing down every single thing you say or every single thing you do. Maybe it's that, you know, they start messing with the IRS status. Maybe it's that they create other pressures with zoning or whatever else to make it so that independent churches are very difficult to do. Because what they had in the Soviet Union, I learned it, I actually didn't know it until the Timothy guy, the Russian guy in the film, was telling us, they had what's called a registered church in the Soviet Union. So the Soviets didn't get rid of the churches. The Soviets created a fake church that was like, you know, Lenin, Stalin, Jesus. They have a church in China. It's called the Three Selves Church right now, where it's like, if you see pictures of it, it's super weird. It's like there's a cross and there's like Mao and it's like President Xi. And it's like, what am I looking? It's so weird. And
what
like,
is it called? The three what?
Three Selves Church or Three Self Church. I'd have to remember if there's an S.
Oh, I need to see this.
And so they have a fake church and they funnel people into it. And then they persecute everybody that's got religion outside of the fake church. And that was really the impetus for making the film. And we said, well, we've got to talk about the schools too.
Well, is that, what's fueling the Uyghur Muslim thing where they're...
Well, communists don't like a competing religion, so they also do like slave labor, and they like making examples of people to keep things under control. So if we just take it at face value that the C in the CCP stands for communist, this is perfectly in line with the way communists behave. That's what they would do with the Christian dissidents in the Soviet Union. They send them to gulags, where their job would be like to, you know, carve a canal out of bedrock, working themselves to death in freezing conditions, and then only for not only the canal to not actually be deep enough or wide enough to do what it had to do. So it's, you know, demoralizing that it failed. But then it drains whichever, I forget which lake it was, Aral Sea or whatever, gets drained because they're idiots and they don't know how things work. They think that they can be the masters of nature. But that's what they would do. They would round up these dissidents and send them off to Gulag. Gulag wasn't a concentration camp like the Nazis had. It was a re-education camp where they were trying to re-educate you through doctrine combined with hard labor. And if you died, you died.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And that's where communism leads to, kids.
That's where communism leads to. And that's why other places too. So here's you know who I feel bad for, and they get real mad. I did this at Northwestern. I told them this to their faces. I did a talk at Northwestern University last year, and they let a bunch of woke protesters in, and they carried on and yelled at me and were mocking me, doing the loser sign on their faces while I was talking.
That's really effective.
It's hard to keep your train of thought while that's going on.
Yeah.
And they started cheering when I started talking about Mao, so they know what it is. And I was like, cheer for your dictator. And they started clapping, and it was like really creepy. But then, so I did this at Northwestern, and I told them something, and they laughed at me. But okay, so Mao created in the mid-1960s a thing called the Red Guard. People all know about this. It was young people. It was mostly college and high school students, but it went down to little kids. Xi Van Fleet was in China during the Red Guard, for example, and she's got that book, Mao's America, out talking about what that was like, surviving that. And the Red Guard went around, destroyed property, harassed, turned in people. They ended up rounding up the sitting president of the CCP, Liu Shaoqi, pulled him out, humiliated him, kicked him out to the countryside to die, right? He came out, he said, he's the chairman of CCP. He comes out, he says, am I not a citizen? Can I not speak? And these teenagers, by the thousands, were out there protesting him and said, no. You're not a citizen. You're not a person. You cannot speak. And they ended up carting him off to die in the countryside. Mao takes his power back. So that's the end of 1967. Took about a year and a half. So as soon as Mao gets back on the throne, we turn around in 1968. What does he do with that Red Guard that was so loyal that got him in? Did he give him trophies? Does he give him a spot in the party? No. He said the Red Guard has become too radical and too left. So he rounded him up and sent him off to the gulag to die. And some of them were so brainwashed, they said shit like, going to work with the peasants in the fields will make my brain even more red, as they got on the trains. So I told these kids at Northwestern, I said, listen, you woke kids, cheer all you want for Mao. This is your future. Stability is what repels revolutions. So if they need destabilizing forces now, that's you. But once they destabilize things enough to take power, as Mao phrased it, that's a new phase of the revolution. That's called building socialism. They don't need destabilizers anymore. They got to get rid of you. And I'm like, if you win, you get your revolution, you lose. And I feel bad. I talk.
Perfectly said, man. Perfectly said. And I'm sure anybody listening to this can mirror teenagers yelling at an adult, telling him to be quiet, carting him off. It's very similar to how people, I mean, he was at a college, he was at a university when he was saying this. The exact same thing happens all the time. We see happen with Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, anybody who dares Crowder for the longest time, anybody who dares step onto these campuses gets treated exactly what he just showed. And again, they think that I don't know what it is. I don't know what they're being told. I don't know what movie they're watching, what history books they're reading, but they think if all of this comes crumbling down, they will have a chance to be in positions of power. And all that's going to happen is whoever takes over in this whole Marxist woke type of movement, they're going to look and say, who was the most radical? We have to get rid of them. I'll keep a few who know what the game is and we're going to go do what we got to do. But they're going to get rid of the people who were willing to protest at the drop of a hat because those people are dangerous. And he said it perfectly. It's phase 2. There's going to be a phase 2. They're not going to bring you along for the ride. Now, a lot of what he was talking about, the biggest enemy of totalitarianism, we got Tucker Carlson talking with a pastor, and he's saying the exact same thing. I find it very, very interesting that he is saying this exact same thing. So let's go ahead and listen to this. Tucker Carlson talking with Pastor Doug Wilson. Let's get into it.
All right. But this is something that people can say, oh, I love my nation and I'm a Christian. Why can't these?
Well, that's how I feel about it. But right. I don't know what it is. So how would you define it?
So it's, I think, very simple. If there is no God above the society, if there's no God above the state, take God away.
Yes.
The state is God.
Yes.
Okay? If there is no God above the state is God. The state becomes God. And it assumes the prerogatives of deity. Cameras at every intersection, aping omniscience,
yes,
omnipresence, in big brothers watching you.
Control of your mind.
Control of your mind. They want to control absolutely everything. Every keystroke, they want to control everything because they're aspiring to deity. The reason they're aspiring to deity is because they don't recognize any God above them. Our current rulers don't believe in God, but they do believe in the devil. Right? All right. And their belief in the devil is why they want to ascend the sides of the north. They want to be as the Most High. That was the initial temptation in the garden. You shall be as God.
Yes.
Okay. So our current rulers are very ambitious and they want to aspire to that height. We don't want to resist them in the name of Christ because we don't want to launch another series of interminable religious wars.
Right.
Okay. Because we don't want the Muslims fighting with the Jews, fighting with the Christians, fighting with, all of that. All right. So that's a most reasonable question. When they say which God, and here's the answer to your question. The Christian nationalist is the one who's willing to answer that question and speaking into the microphone. The true God, the living God, the one who exists.
Yes.
Not the God on our money.
So, obviously, what James was talking about on Rogan and what this pastor's talking about, the pastor has a bit of a bias because he sees it as, you know, he's a pastor. He is very firm in what the one true religion is, and, you know, that's the way to God. Whereas James notices, as somebody who's not as religious, doesn't seem like he has much religion, as he doesn't really, you know, he's starting to, you know, tap into the Bible, whatever. But he sees it as Christians and Jewish people. Undeniably, you can't look at Islam as well and be like, they don't fall under that as well. Those three peoples, those three religions, when they're devout people, they are 100% willing to say, this is what is above state and always will be. They just are. They're willing to say they're Hashem, they're Allah, they're Jesus. They're 100% me, I say Jesus. They're 100% willing to do that. And there's no way that a state could be above the teachings that we have in our books, in the Quran, in the Torah, in the Bible. There's no way to get state above that. So you have to do away with it. Now, some interesting things. When I look at, first off, how similar is what James was talking about? How similar is it to the woke movement? I see it all. They kept referring to it as a cult, but I think of the woke movement right away. You have to be ideologically remolded, right? He was talking about that. There's a re-education that happens. And where does that happen here? It happens in the schools. It's not forced, but it's an institution that we want all of our kids to go to. Everybody wants their child to learn higher education. Every single one. People can't be questioning. That's very, I've said it time and time again. You're having a I've seen it so many times in videos. Somebody wants to ask a question about what this rally's about, why they're there, why they feel the way they do. Someone else gets wind that it's X, you know, Republican conservative person. They come up behind the person talking. They say, this person's actually very problematic. You might want to just walk away. And the next thing you know, they walk away like as if that person's their keeper. And they go, sorry, I can't talk. I don't want to talk. Sorry, I don't consent. And they walk away. I've seen it time and time again. You can't be around those people. You know, you calling them radical. He was saying how Joe, you know, might be a threat to democracy, but the word is problematic in the West. That's how you get branded right away. And then also when they talk about being treated like non-people, well, I think of Trump right away. And I just like to apologize for anybody who's watching both channels. I know you saw that clip on the other channel, but I had to bring it over here for this conversation. It just made so much sense. And when they're talking about being treated like a non-person, I think of Trump right away. When people, if you are a Trump supporter, if you are Trump himself, people lose all sympathy for you. There's no sympathy. There's no empathy. There's no good faith. There's no conversation. It's just you're a demon. You support a demon. Criminal person. You might be a criminal too. All of the humanity that you're supposed to show your fellow man out the window. That's that ideology, man. That's that way of thinking. You know, that's why I say a lot of the woke movement is directly linked to Marxism. The organizers, the people who are at the head of it, they're all trained in this. They're as well read in these topics as James was showing himself to be. They know all the markings of it, just like Jordan Peterson, just like Joe Rogan does. And then another thing, social religion. Atheists don't have a religion, so they fall right into the social religion. How? And again, where does that happen? In the school. That's it. It happens in the school. Now, I just want to, I'll show you a really quick clip here. This is actually that church that they were talking about, the Three Selves. It's a very quick clip, but somebody took it. You can't take too long of a clip in a place like that because you will get in trouble for sure. Here, check this out. So that is the church area. That's where people sit. And if you look at the front there, they make sure they have Mao and Xi Jinping at the top of everything, above everything. The again, like that pastor said, aspiring to deity. That's exactly what these people are doing. Those two images are above the pastor, and they're putting themselves above God. They are trying to replace God because that's how you're going to keep people in check the best. Now, what ended up happening with Stalin. James was talking about this living church. Here's how it actually went down. So right away, religious education was banned. Now think about how things are today, and think about what you're hearing. So religious education was banned, right? It's forbidden. You could not do that. Anti-religious propaganda started to spread everywhere. Then they made this living church because they could not, the propaganda was not enough. Again, like both clips that I showed you were talking about, when people have this resolve, when they have this knowing that they have this religion, that they have this God, they're not going to go in for your propaganda. They're not going for it. So when the anti-religious propaganda failed, they made the living church. The living church was obviously just a church that was co-opted by the government. It failed. What they did after it failed, they made something called the League of the Godless. The League of the Godless was pushing this atheist message and attacked religion. Is that not what's going on today? Do you not see that? How many times have you seen people constantly pushing this atheist mess? Look at woke culture. For some reason, and I don't know why, because they're completely welcome in Christianity. I know that they're welcome in a lot of modern synagogues, but everybody who seems to be LGBTQ seems to completely push away religion. They do what? They push atheist messages and they attack religion. How many times have you seen one person in the LGBTQ movement get surrounded by a bunch of religious people? I don't see it that often. Could be skewed. Maybe you have that video. Let me know. But what you usually see is one person preaching the word of God, and they get surrounded by those people. They get attacked by those people. I've seen it time and time again. It's just very similar. Now, going on, the religious leaders were actually executed and they were jailed. They were seen as, the reason that they were given is because they were anti the revolution that was taking place. They didn't want the goodness to spread in communist USSR. So, and then after that, religious gatherings were banned. And then after that, and this is why it is the biggest enemy of totalitarianism, is because after everything I just said, still, in 1937, still, 56% of people still identified as believers in their religion. After all of that, the attacks, watching the persecution, being banned to learn about it, being banned to speak about it, all of that, having this godless, and just so you know, the League of the Godless, they were like militant atheists. So even after all that, still more than half of the population were still believers. And that's why you'll see a lot of religion under such an attack, because it is the one thing that people will stay with to the very end. And James said it perfectly, because even if you do something to me, I know I get to go to a better place. How do you fight that? How do you fight that? You can try all the propaganda you want, and I think it's happening right now. You know, if you notice, people are, and you know, we're all victims of it. We're all seeing it. But if you meet a good Muslim person, a good person who embraces Islam, they're really good people. They really are. But what do we think when we hear about that religion? Well, a lot of people think about terrorism, right? And then when it comes to Christians, now you don't just think of nice Christians. We used to think of Ned Flanders. You don't think of Ned Flanders anymore. You think of Christian nationalists. And then that's being wrapped up with mega Republican. And that's being wrapped up with patriots. And then that's wrapped up with J6. It's a way to brand people negatively. So that's what the Christians are getting now. And then if you're Jewish, everybody knows about all the things people think about Jewish people. But what do they all have in common? They're devoutly religious. And they're all being made into an enemy in some way, shape, or fashion. Very interesting. I'm telling you, You may not agree with some of the religions that I just said, but if you look at it, all three are being demonized at the same time as we see certain people trying to, as that pastor said, imitate deity. I'm just saying. Seems a little odd. And then, yeah, that's it. That's all I wanted to say, guys. There's a whole lot to it, but it's very interesting. That is the biggest enemy of the state. And again, religion might not be your thing. You're not into it. I get it 100%. But build up, and maybe you have it already. I don't want to assume. Build up some kind of constitution. Build up some kind of resolve, something that you're attached to, that you will not give away, and that you will not allow anyone who's looking for power to put themselves above. And if you have that, even if you don't have religion, if you have that at the very least, you won't be susceptible to everything that they're trying to throw at us. Anyways, guys, like, subscribe, share. It helps tremendously. And other than that, I'm out.